In October 2016, the Nevada State Legislature held a special session. The agenda had one major item. Senate Bill 1 would authorize Clark County to issue $750 million in public bonds, repayable over 30 years, to help finance a new stadium for a National Football League team that did not yet exist in Las Vegas. The session lasted 6 days. The bill passed. The room tax in Clark County went up by 0.88%, and the largest public subsidy for an NFL stadium in American history was approved without a single public vote. The Las Vegas Raiders did not yet have permission from the NFL to move from Oakland. The Davis family, owners of the team, had not yet committed their own funds. The land had not yet been purchased. The stadium did not have a name, but the public money was already locked in. 4 years later, the building opened. 6 more years after that, the room tax that pays the bonds was still in place. The Raiders had cleared more than $4 billion in franchise value appreciation, and the law that authorized the deal contained no mechanism, none, requiring the team to pay back a single dollar of the public's contribution. This is not an opinion. This is the text of the bill. The legislature was asked when it convened whether to include a clawback provision. The answer was no. This is document number 3. The Allegiant Stadium file is open. I want to walk you through how a deal like this gets made, because the financial structure of Allegiant Stadium is not, on its surface, the worst piece of stadium financing in American history. The $750 million in public bonds is not paid out of general tax revenue. It is paid through a 0.88% surcharge on hotel rooms in Clark County, a charge that visitors to Las Vegas pay when they book a room. By the end of fiscal year 2025, this room tax had collected more than $428 million toward the stadium debt. The Las Vegas Stadium Authority, the public agency that holds the bonds, has been told for years that this funding mechanism makes Allegiant Stadium a, quote, no-brainer for taxpayers, because the taxpayers, the locals, are not the ones paying. The tourists pay, and the tourists pay willingly because they would have come anyway. If you are following this argument closely, and if you want to read the next file in the series the day it opens, the way to do that is to subscribe to the construction files. Every file in this series builds on the one before it. Millennium Tower first, 432 Park, Allegiant Stadium today. The next file is already in production, and the patterns I'm about to walk you through in this stadium are going to come up again in every file that follows. Here is the part of the argument that gets quieter. The Clark County bond, the one secured by the room tax, is a 30-year obligation. The room tax was authorized to run until 2048. That is the year the final bond payment from Clark County is due. The structure assumes that the room tax will keep generating enough revenue every year for 30 years to make the debt service payments without interruption. The structure also includes a debt reserve fund of $90 million, which is roughly enough to cover 2 years of bond payments if the room tax revenue falls short. And if the room tax revenue falls short, and if the debt reserve runs out, the bill does not disappear. Under the terms of Senate Bill 1, Clark County is required to make up the shortfall out of the general fund, out of the same money that pays for police, fire, parks, sanitation, and schools. The Raiders are not on the hook for that. The NFL is not on the hook for that. The hotel chains that benefit from the events are not on the hook for that. The local taxpayer, the one who was told they would never have to pay, is on the hook for that. This has already happened twice. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the room tax revenue collapsed. Clark County had to raid the debt reserve fund to cover the bond payments. At one point, the county owed $16.1 million in June 2021 and had to take $11.7 million out of the reserve to meet the obligation. The county did not call it a default. It was, in the words of the county's communications director, quote, expected in light of the decline in tourism. But the structure that was supposed to insulate the taxpayer absorbed 2 years of stress in 18 months. And the next time a recession hits Las Vegas hospitality, the same structure will absorb the same stress again. The room tax will be in place until 2048. The number of recessions, pandemics, and tourism downturns that can occur between now and 2048 is not zero. The most recent room tax data is worth pausing on. Las Vegas tourism declined for 10 consecutive months ending October 2025. In the July to September 2025 period, the stadium room tax revenue came in 6% below budget. Compared to the same 3 months of 2024, it was down 12.5%. The debt service payment for 2025 totals $37.4 million. The reserve fund holds $90 million. The math, for now, still works. But the trend line is not in the direction the legislature was promised it would go in 2016. Now, I want to talk about the other side of this deal. The Raiders bought the Las Vegas franchise rights, in effect, for a small fraction of what the franchise has become worth. The team's value before the move from Oakland was estimated at around $2.4 billion. By 2024, the team's value had reached more than $6.7 billion. By the most recent Forbes valuation, the Raiders are worth more than $8 billion. That is roughly $5.6 billion in franchise appreciation since the stadium deal was signed. The Davis family, which owns the Raiders, captured all of that upside. The public, which underwrote $750 million of the stadium that made the appreciation possible, captured none of it. There is no clawback provision in Senate Bill 1. There is no equity stake for Clark County in the Raiders franchise. There is no mechanism for the public to participate in the value its money helped create. I personally think this is the part of the story that does not get said out loud often enough. If you have made it this point in the file, you already know what kind of channel this is. A channel that opens the documents and shows you what is actually in them. The way I keep making these files is the same way every independent investigation gets made. If you have not already, subscribe now. The next file is already in production. The construction of the stadium itself ran roughly on time and roughly on budget, which is more than can be said for most public projects of this scale. The final cost came in around $1.9 billion. The Raiders contributed approximately $1.15 billion, including $200 million in the form of an NFLG4 loan. The public share remained at $750 million. The stadium opened in 2020, hosted a Super Bowl in February 2024, has hosted WrestleMania, 2 college football playoff national championships, Beyoncé, Taylor Swift, and the now resident University of Nevada, Las Vegas football program. By the most recent Stadium Authority data, more than 7.4 million people have attended events at Allegiant since opening, in a city with a metropolitan population of 2.3 million. By that measure, the stadium has been an event success. The question the file asks is not whether the stadium works as a venue. It works. The question is whether the public got what it paid for. And the answer to that question depends on whether you measure the deal by tourism dollars generated, by sales tax collections, by economic activity in the immediate area, or by the criterion the Nevada legislature actually wrote into Senate Bill 1, which is the obligation of Clark County to make $750 million in bond payments, with no recourse to the Raiders if the room tax falls short, and no equity participation in the franchise's appreciation. The Raiders, for their part, have not pretended the deal was anything other than what it was. The Davis family was open from the beginning that they were seeking the biggest public subsidy they could get. The NFL took a $385 million relocation fee from the Raiders to approve the Oakland to Las Vegas move, which the league office distributed to the other 31 franchises. USA Today described this fee as the biggest boondoggle in sports, and as free money for all the other teams. The Raiders paid that fee with revenue that the Allegiant Stadium deal made possible. In other words, the $385 million fee paid to other NFL owners was, in a real sense, indirectly subsidized by the Clark County room tax. The room tax did not write the check, but the deal that the room tax enabled is what made the fee affordable to the Raiders. A 2022 poll by 8 News Now and Emerson College found that 61.7% of Nevadans opposed allocating taxpayer money for sports stadiums. Only 17.1% supported it. This poll was taken before the Las Vegas Athletics Stadium deal was approved by the legislature in 2023, with an additional $380 million in public funding. The pattern, in other words, did not stop at Allegiant. The pattern continued. I personally think one detail closes this file better than any other, and it is this. In the months leading up to the 2016 special session, the Southern Nevada Tourism Infrastructure Committee considered multiple proposals for the stadium funding. One option discussed during those deliberations was a clawback provision that would have required the Raiders to repay a portion of the public contribution if the franchise's value appreciated beyond a defined threshold. That provision was not included in the final bill. The legislature considered it, debated it, and chose not to write it into the law. By the time the Raiders' franchise value had passed $8 billion, the absence of that provision was worth, at minimum, hundreds of millions of dollars to the Davis family. The decision to leave that provision out of the bill was made in 2016 by a small group of legislators in a 6-day special session with no public vote. It cannot be revisited now. The bill is law. The room tax will be collected through 2048, and the Raiders will play in a stadium that the public helped pay for, on terms the public will never be allowed to renegotiate. This is document number 3. This is what is in the file. The next file opens on the California High-Speed Rail Project, where the public was promised a $33 billion bullet train and instead got a $128 billion construction site that has not produced a single commercial mile of operating track. If you have made it this far in the file, you already know what kind of channel this is. Subscribe to the construction files now to read the next one the day it opens. Every collapse has a cost. Every cost has a record. We open the file.